Long ago, before he became the scary sea monster we know today, Davy Jones was a man. He walked the land like everyone else, but his heart was different. He was brave, proud, and loved the sea more than anything. But there was something else about him. He was not just a sailor. He was chosen for a very important job, a job bigger than any captain, bigger than any king. The sea herself had chosen him. You see, in the world of pirates and ships, there is a magical lady called Calypso. She is not just a person. She is the sea itself. She is the wind, the waves, the storms, and the calm waters. She loved the sea more than anything, and she needed someone to help her, someone to do her work when she could not. That someone was Davy Jones. Calypso gave Jones a mission. She told him to sail the seas forever and to take care of the souls of the dead. When sailors died at sea, lost and afraid, it was Davy Jones who was supposed to help them. He would guide them to the other side so they would not be alone. To do this job, Calypso gave him a magical ship, the Flying Dutchman. It was not like any other ship. It could dive underwater, faster than anything. It was alive, almost breathing, with ropes that moved like snakes and sails that never tore. With this ship, Jones could travel anywhere in the ocean, above or below. But there was one thing Calypso promised him. If he did his work faithfully for 10 years, then after those 10 years, he could step onto land again. And when he touched the land, she would be there, waiting for him. They were in love, or at least Jones thought so. 10 years is a long time, but he loved her so much that he agreed. He would do his job. He would take the souls of the dead. He would serve her. He would wait. And so he did. For 10 long years, Davy Jones sailed the seas. His ship collected the dead. His crew was made of men who had joined him, men who had promised to serve 100 years on the Dutchman in exchange for escaping death. Slowly, the ship began to look different. The longer the men served, the more they changed. They grew barnacles, shells, coral, even fish-like features. They became part of the sea. Jones himself started to change too, though at first it was small. At the end of the 10 years, Jones returned to land. He was excited, his heart beating strong. He wanted to see Calypso again. He wanted her to keep her promise. But when he arrived, she was not there. She had not come. She had broken her word. Davy Jones was crushed. His love for her turned into hate. His heart, once strong, was now full of pain and rage. He no longer cared about helping lost souls. He stopped guiding them to the afterlife. Instead, he dragged them into his service, trapping them on the Flying Dutchman. He twisted his mission into something cruel. But his pain did not stop there. Jones did something terrible. He cut out his own heart. He could not stand the hurt anymore, so he ripped it from his chest. He placed it in a wooden chest, which would later be called the dead man's chest. Whoever had his heart would control him. He buried it deep in the sand, far away, hoping no one would find it. Without his heart, Davy Jones became something no longer human. The sea cursed him. His face twisted and changed until he had tentacles like an octopus. His left hand became a giant crab claw. His skin turned slimy and green, and he could no longer walk on land. He was trapped at sea forever. His crew also became more and more like sea creatures, cursed and broken. Together they became a terrifying sight for any sailor who dared to cross them. From then on, Davy Jones ruled the oceans with fear. Sailors whispered his name at night. If you died at sea, they said your soul might be taken by Jones. Some said he would offer you a deal. You could serve 100 years aboard the Flying Dutchman instead of dying right away. Many desperate men agreed, not knowing that serving him meant losing your humanity piece by piece until you became unrecognizable. But even with all his anger, pain, and cruelty, Jones never stopped hurting inside. Deep down, he still loved Calypso. That love, mixed with his hate, made him even more dangerous. He was not just a monster. He was a broken heart with the power of the sea. And so the legend of Davy Jones began. Sailors called the bottom of the sea Davy Jones' Locker, a place where lost souls go. His name became feared, whispered, and never spoken too loudly. This was only the beginning of his story. Years passed and the seas belonged to Davy Jones. His ship, the Flying Dutchman, could appear out of nowhere, striking fear into every sailor's heart. The sails were torn and dark, the wood looked alive, and the crew was more like monsters than men. Barnacles stuck to their faces, claws replaced hands, and shells grew where skin once was. No one dared to fight them because how can you fight the sea itself? Jones had one thing that made him even more dangerous: the Kraken. The Kraken was a massive sea monster, larger than any ship, with tentacles that could drag a whole vessel beneath the waves in seconds. Sailors would see the water ripple and boil before giant arms burst through, smashing the decks, wrapping around masts, and pulling everything down. When the Kraken was unleashed, escape was almost impossible. Jones used it to destroy ships, capture men, and remind the seas that he was king. But even monsters have rules. Jones' curse meant he could not step on land unless it was once every 10 years, and even then only for a short time. So he ruled from the water, making deals with desperate sailors. If a man was drowning or shipwrecked, Jones would appear. He'd offer a choice: serve 100 years on the Dutchman or die right there and sink into the sea. Most men, terrified of death, agreed. But they didn't realize the truth. Serving Jones meant slowly losing yourself until you were nothing but coral and shell. This is where Jones's story crosses with Captain Jack Sparrow. Jack was clever, tricky, and always looking for a way out of trouble. But years before the movies began, Jack had made a deal with Davy Jones himself. Jack wanted to be captain of the Black Pearl, the fastest ship in the Caribbean. Jones made it possible. He raised the Black Pearl from the depths of the sea, fully restored and ready for Jack. In return, Jack promised to serve Jones after 13 years. At first, this seemed fair enough. Jack got his ship, his freedom, and many adventures. But Jack being Jack, he never planned to keep his promise. As the years ticked down, Jones came to collect. He sent his crew to remind Jack of the deal, and when Jack refused, Jones called for the Kraken. It was around this time that Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann entered the story. Will was brave, loyal, and determined to save his father, Bootstrap Bill Turner. Bootstrap had been a sailor who made the same mistake as many others. He joined Jones's crew to escape death. Over time, he became part of the ship itself, barnacles covering his face, his body no longer fully human. Will loved his father and wanted to free him from the curse. Bootstrap's fate tied Will directly to Davy Jones, and Jack Sparrow, always scheming, tried to use Will to bargain his way out of his own debt. Jones wasn't fooled. He knew Jack was clever, slippery, and always trying to trick others. So he tightened the net, pushing Jack closer and closer to the end. One of the scariest things about Davy Jones was his heart. Remember, he had cut it out and placed it in the dead man's chest. The chest was hidden on a secret island, guarded by traps and magic. Jones carried the key with him, keeping it locked in a pouch tied around his neck. Whoever had the chest and the heart inside controlled Jones. They could stab it and kill him, or use it to command him. Because of this, many people began hunting for the chest. Jack Sparrow, Will Turner, Lord Beckett of the East India Trading Company, and others. Will wanted the chest so he could use it to free his father. Jack wanted it to escape his debt. Beckett wanted it so he could control the seas by controlling Jones. Suddenly, the chest became the most important thing in the Caribbean, and Jones knew it. He fought fiercely to keep it hidden, sending his monstrous crew to chase anyone who came near. But even with all his power, his ship, and his Kraken, Jones was still broken inside. Sometimes, when no one was watching, he played a tune on his organ, a haunting, sad song that filled the ship. He played it because it reminded him of Calypso, the sea goddess who had betrayed him. He still kept a locket with her picture, even though he hated her. His heart might have been locked away in a chest, but his feelings never truly left him. The sea was filled with whispers of Jones, of the Dutchman, of the chest. Sailors feared him, but some also pitied him, for deep down he was just a man who had loved and lost. Still, pity could not save you if you crossed him. If the Kraken was sent after you, there was little hope. Jack Sparrow was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The seas grew darker as Davy Jones hunted Jack Sparrow. Jack's time had run out, and Jones was not a man who forgave debts. The Dutchman stalked the Black Pearl like a shark following its prey, waiting for the moment to strike. Jack knew he couldn't escape forever. Jones first sent his crew to remind Jack of the bargain. They came crawling out of the water, half fish, half men, covered in slime and barnacles. Their eyes glowed, their voices gurgled. They climbed aboard the Pearl, offering Jack a choice: pay his debt or face the Kraken. Jack, of course, tried to talk his way out of it, but Jones had heard every excuse before. Then came the Kraken. At first, it was only a ripple in the water, a deep rumble that shook the ship. Then bubbles rose, and suddenly massive tentacles burst out of the sea. They slammed onto the Pearl's deck, breaking wood and flinging sailors into the air. Jack, Will, and the crew fought desperately, cutting at the tentacles with swords, firing cannons, trying to break free. But the Kraken was too strong. It wrapped around the ship, pulling it down inch by inch. Jones didn't even need to be there. He stood on the Dutchman, far away, watching through his long spyglass. His tentacled beard twitched as he smirked. He enjoyed seeing sailors struggle because in the end, the sea always won. Jack, slippery as ever, tried to escape, leaving his crew behind. But in the end, he turned back. He faced the Kraken alone, sword in hand, standing tall on the deck of the Pearl. With a mighty roar, the Kraken dragged the ship under. The Black Pearl was gone, and so was Jack Sparrow. Davy Jones had won. Or so he thought. You see, Jack's friends were not ready to let him stay dead. Will Turner, Elizabeth Swann, and the rest of the crew wanted to bring Jack back. To do this, they would need help from Tia Dalma, a mysterious woman who knew strange magic. She was wise, quiet, and lived by the sea. But here's the secret. Tia Dalma was really Calypso, the very sea goddess who had once loved and betrayed Davy Jones. She still cared for him, though she would never admit it. Tia Dalma told the crew there was a way to bring Jack back from Davy Jones's locker, the place at the bottom of the sea where lost souls go. But to get there, they would need a captain brave enough to guide them. And so they brought back another pirate, Captain Barbossa, who had once been Jack's enemy. Together, they set off on a journey that would take them to the ends of the earth. Meanwhile, Jones had bigger problems. The East India Trading Company, led by the cold and ruthless Lord Cutler Beckett, had discovered the secret of the dead man's chest. Beckett wanted control of the seas, and with Jones's heart in his hands, he could have exactly that. Beckett forced Jones into his service, making him attack pirate ships and wipe out anyone who stood in the company's way. Jones hated being controlled. He had once been the master of the seas, feared by all, and now he was nothing more than Beckett's weapon. But he had no choice. Whoever controlled his heart controlled him. And so the Dutchman sailed, destroying pirates at Beckett's command. At the same time, Will Turner still dreamed of freeing his father, Bootstrap Bill, from the Dutchman. Every time he saw his father, covered in barnacles, slipping further into the ship, his heart ached. Will wanted to save him, but to do that, he needed to control the Dutchman himself. And to do that, he needed Jones's heart. So now 3 different groups wanted the same thing. Jack's crew wanted Jack back from the locker. Beckett wanted Jones's heart to control the seas, and Will wanted the heart to save his father. All roads led back to Davy Jones. But Jones himself was not just sitting idle. Sometimes, when the night was quiet and the sea was calm, he sat at his great organ, playing his sad tune. The music echoed across the ship, haunting his crew. In those moments, Jones seemed almost human again, remembering the love he had lost. He even held a locket that matched one Calypso had once kept. Though he hated her for breaking her promise, he also longed for her. His anger and sadness battled inside him, making him more dangerous than ever. The war for the seas was coming, and at the center of it all stood Davy Jones. He was no longer just a monster of legend. He was a key to victory, a cursed captain whose heart could decide the fate of every ship, every sailor, and every wave. But fate has a way of surprising even the most powerful. Jack Sparrow was not gone forever. His friends were coming for him, and when he returned, Davy Jones's story would reach its stormiest chapter yet. Far away from the seas of the living, Jack Sparrow sat in a strange and endless desert. This was Davy Jones's locker, the place where lost souls were trapped. Ships lay broken in the sand, the sky burned with strange colors, and the air felt heavy. Jack was alone, or so it seemed. His mind was full of tricks, so he saw many versions of himself, all talking and arguing. He was stuck, but not gone forever. Meanwhile, back in the real world, Tia Dalma, Barbosa, Will, Elizabeth, and the rest of the crew prepared to rescue Jack. To reach the locker, they needed to sail to the world's end. Their ship tipped over a giant waterfall, falling into darkness, and when they came through the other side, they found Jack and the Black Pearl waiting in the desert. Together, they pulled the pearl back to the sea and returned to the land of the living. But while Jack's friends were rescuing him, Davy Jones was being forced to serve Lord Beckett. Beckett was clever and cruel. He didn't care about the sea or freedom. He cared about power. With Jones under his control, Beckett began destroying pirate ships everywhere. He sent the Dutchman across the oceans, sinking fleets, killing crews, and striking fear into all who resisted. The age of pirates was ending, and Jones's power was being used not for himself, but for a greedy man sitting behind a desk. Jones hated it. His face, covered with slimy tentacles, curled in anger whenever Beckett gave him orders. He longed to be free, but without his heart, he was trapped. Worse, his crew, who had once followed him because they feared and respected him, now saw that he was controlled. The Dutchman still obeyed, but the soul of the ship was breaking. In the middle of this storm, Will Turner tried to make his own plans. He wanted to free his father, Bootstrap Bill, who was slowly losing his mind after so many years on the Dutchman. His body was fusing with the ship, barnacles growing over his face, his memory fading. Will believed that if he killed Jones and took his place as captain of the Dutchman, he could free his father. So Will thought about betraying Jack to reach his goal. Elizabeth Swann also found herself caught in the chaos. Once a governor's daughter, she was now a pirate, strong and bold. But she carried guilt for Jack's death when the Kraken had taken him. She wondered if she had made the right choices, if the sea would ever forgive her. As for Jack Sparrow, once rescued from the locker, he returned to his usual self, clever, sneaky, and impossible to trust. Jack wanted the dead man's chest for himself, because whoever had it controlled Davy Jones. Jack liked the idea of holding power over the sea's most feared captain. So, even though he smiled and joked with his friends, deep down, he was always thinking of how to keep the chest for himself. But let's turn back to Davy Jones, because something important was happening. Beckett, clever as he was, wanted to know everything about Jones. He wanted to understand what made him weak. So he asked questions about the past, about the sea goddess Calypso. Jones became angry at the mention of her name, but the truth was, he had never stopped thinking of her. When Jones was alone, he still played his organ, filling the Dutchman with sad music. He still opened his locket, looking at the picture of Calypso inside. The pain of her betrayal burned him, but the memory of her love still lived inside his heart. He was a monster to the world, but inside, he was still a broken man who had once been human. Eventually, the pirates called a meeting, a great gathering known as the Brethren Court. This was when the most powerful pirate lords of the world came together to fight back against Beckett and Davy Jones. Jack, Barbossa, Elizabeth, and others attended. They knew they couldn't defeat Beckett if Jones still sailed under his command. To win, they needed to break Jones free of Beckett's control or destroy him. And there was only one way to do that: find the dead man's chest and stab the heart inside. Whoever did so would kill Jones, but they would also take his place as captain of the Dutchman, cursed to sail forever and ferry lost souls. It was a heavy price. As the Brethren Court planned their rebellion, Beckett tightened his grip. He forced Jones to sink more ships, to spread more fear, and to prepare for a final battle. Beckett believed he was unstoppable. He had the Dutchman, he had Davy Jones, and he had the Kraken. The pirates didn't stand a chance. But what Beckett didn't know was this: the sea herself still had a say. Calypso, trapped in human form as Tia Dalma, was waiting. The pirates, desperate for help, considered setting her free. And if Calypso returned to her full power, no man, not even Davy Jones, could control the seas again. The stage was set. The pirates gathered for war. Beckett prepared his fleets, and Davy Jones, torn between anger, sorrow, and hatred, sharpened his claws. The waves grew restless, storms began to stir, and the final battle for the heart of the sea was about to begin. The seas had never been so restless. Storm clouds stretched across the horizon, lightning cracked, and the waves tossed ships like toys. Every pirate in the world could feel that something huge was about to happen. On one side stood Lord Beckett and his powerful East India Trading Company with their many warships. On another side stood the Brethren Court, the pirate lords who wanted freedom. And between them both was Davy Jones, captain of the Flying Dutchman, chained to Beckett's command, but full of his own rage and sorrow. Before the pirates could fight Beckett, they needed help from someone greater than all of them: Calypso. Tia Dalma, who had guided Jack's crew and helped them rescue him from the locker, was finally revealed to be Calypso, the goddess of the sea. The pirates argued about what to do with her. Some feared her power. Some thought she would betray them. But Barbossa was clever. He knew that the only way to fight Beckett and Jones was to set her free. So, in the middle of a stormy night, the pirates gathered around Tia Dalma. They spoke the words, performed the ritual, and released her from her human form. She rose from the deck, her hair flowing like waves, her eyes glowing with power. For the first time in years, Calypso was free. And how did she respond? Not with kindness, not with mercy. She was furious. She grew taller and taller, her voice like thunder, her arms stretching out like the ocean itself. She had been trapped by men for too long, betrayed and used, and at the center of her anger was one man, Davy Jones. When Calypso was freed, she did not attack the pirates or Beckett. Instead, she vanished into the sea. But her fury did not fade. She stirred up a storm so massive it swallowed the horizon. Waves rose like mountains, whirlpools opened in the sea, and lightning turned the sky white. This was her rage, her answer to being bound in human form for so long. As the storm grew, Beckett ordered his fleet to prepare for battle. His warship, the Endeavour, stood tall, clean, and proud. He believed his cannons and numbers would crush the pirates. But he made one mistake. He thought he could control the sea. On the other side, the pirates made their stand. Jack Sparrow, Elizabeth Swann, Will Turner, and Barbossa all stood on the Black Pearl. The Brethren Court had argued endlessly, but at last they chose Elizabeth as their pirate king, surprising everyone. She gave a rousing speech, her voice carried by the wind, reminding the pirates that freedom was worth dying for. The crews cheered, raising their swords, ready for the final fight. But in truth, this was not just a war between pirates and Beckett. It was also the end of Davy Jones's story. His pain, his betrayal, his curse, all of it was rushing toward this battle. Jones stood on the deck of the Dutchman as the storm raged. His tentacles twitched, his claw clicked, and his strange fish-like eyes glared across the water. Inside, he burned with anger. He hated Calypso for abandoning him. He hated Beckett for controlling him. And he hated Jack Sparrow for slipping away again and again. He longed to crush them all beneath the sea. The battle began with thunder. Cannons roared, smoke filled the air, and the Dutchman clashed with the Black Pearl. The two great ships circled each other, firing broadsides, their crews leaping from deck to deck in a storm of swords. The waves lifted them high, then crashed them down, and all the while Calypso's fury spun the sea into a giant whirlpool. The Pearl and the Dutchman were pulled into it, locked together in a deadly dance. Jones was unstoppable. He swept across the decks, his tentacles lashing, his claw snapping. He fought with fury, striking down anyone in his path. His crew, monstrous and loyal, followed him into the fray. On the other side, Jack and Will fought desperately, dodging, cutting, and climbing as the storm threatened to swallow them all. But Jones's true battle was not with swords. It was with his own heart. Deep down, he was still the man who had once loved Calypso. Even as he fought, he carried the memory of her, the pain of her broken promise. The sea around him, raging and wild, was proof that she had not forgotten him either. Her storm was his curse come to life. As the whirlpool pulled the ships deeper and deeper, it became clear. This battle was not just about pirates or Beckett. It was about the fate of Davy Jones himself. His heart, hidden in the dead man's chest, was out there on the deck of another ship. Whoever reached it would decide his end. And so, in the middle of lightning and roaring waves, the fight for Davy Jones's heart began. The whirlpool spun faster and faster, sucking the Black Pearl and the Flying Dutchman toward its center. Rain hammered down, thunder shook the skies, and lightning lit up the faces of men and monsters alike. The sea goddess Calypso had unleashed her fury, and no one could escape it. On the Pearl, Jack Sparrow swung his sword, dodging monstrous sailors with shells on their faces and crab claws for hands. On the Dutchman, Davy Jones himself roared as he slashed through pirates, his tentacles whipping around to grab and throw men overboard. The storm belonged to him, or at least he thought so. Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann fought side by side, their blades clashing against Jones's cursed crew. Will's mind was sharp and steady. He wanted to reach Jones's heart, hidden in the dead man's chest, to free his father and end the curse. Elizabeth fought with fire and fury, knowing that the battle was not only for freedom, but also for the love she carried for Will. Jones spotted them through the storm. His eyes narrowed and he stormed across the deck, his crab claw raised. He slammed it down on the wood, splitting planks as he snarled, "Do you fear death?" His voice was deep and wet like the bottom of the ocean. Will raised his sword, but Jones was too fast. Tentacles whipped out, grabbing Will by the throat and slamming him into the mast. Jones sneered, "You will serve 100 years before the mast." He was ready to drag Will down, to make him part of the Dutchman forever. But Jack Sparrow wasn't about to let that happen. With his usual grin, he swung down from a rope, slashing at the tentacles and pulling Will free. "Sorry, mate," Jack said, winking, "but I'm going to need him alive." Jones turned his fury on Jack. Tentacles lashed, claws snapped, and soon the two captains were locked in a fierce duel. Jack darted about, dodging, mocking, fighting with his clever tricks, while Jones loomed over him, striking with inhuman strength. Every clash of their swords sent sparks flying in the storm. Meanwhile, Elizabeth and Will fought to keep the crew of the Dutchman from overwhelming them. The decks were slick with rain, swords flashing in the lightning. Cannons blasted, wood splintered, and the whirlpool dragged both ships deeper into its swirling mouth. But in the middle of the chaos, something strange happened, something beautiful. Elizabeth and Will, fighting side by side with their hearts pounding, realized they might not survive. They could die here, in the storm, with Davy Jones looming over them. And so, with Barbossa's help, they chose to marry right there on the deck of the Black Pearl. Barbossa shouted the vows between swings of his sword. "Do you take her?" he yelled, cutting down an enemy. "I do," Will answered, stabbing back another. "Do you take him?" Barbossa bellowed. "I do," Elizabeth cried, her blade flashing. "Then by the power invested in me, you are married." The pirates cheered even as they fought, and Will and Elizabeth kissed in the middle of the battle. It was a moment of love in the heart of chaos. But Davy Jones would not allow joy to last. He stormed across the deck, smashing through men, his rage brighter than the lightning above. He faced Elizabeth and Will together, snarling, his claw raised high. He wanted to crush their hope, to tear their love apart, because his own love had been destroyed long ago. Jack, meanwhile, had slipped away, climbing toward the dead man's chest. He knew the battle would only end if someone stabbed Jones's heart. He reached for the chest, the key glinting in his hand, but before he could make his move, Jones appeared. Tentacles wrapped around Jack, slamming him to the ground. Jones towered over him, snarling, "You are a hard man to kill, Sparrow." His claw closed in, ready to strike. Jack wriggled free, slipping away as always, but Jones was relentless. Then came the moment that changed everything. Jones stabbed Will Turner through the chest. The blade sank deep and Will collapsed, gasping, his life fading away. Elizabeth screamed his name, trying to reach him, but Jones held her back with his tentacles. Jack saw his chance. He still held the key, and the dead man's chest was right there. He looked at the heart inside, then at Will, dying in Elizabeth's arms. For once, Jack Sparrow made a choice that wasn't just about himself. He pressed the key into Will's hand. With the last of his strength, Will's fingers closed around it. Together, Jack and Elizabeth helped Will drive the sword into Davy Jones's heart. Jones's eyes widened in shock. He looked down, the blade piercing his chest, and for the first time he was silent. His tentacles quivered, his claw dropped, and he staggered backward. The storm roared louder, as if the sea itself cried out. Davy Jones, the terror of the seas, the cursed captain of the Dutchman, fell into the whirlpool. He sank into the dark, swallowed by the waves he had once ruled. His body vanished beneath the water, leaving only ripples behind. The battle was not yet over, but Davy Jones was gone. The whirlpool roared as Davy Jones sank into the dark, swallowed by the sea he had ruled for so long. His tentacles vanished beneath the waves, his claw slipped from sight, and the ocean closed over him. The mighty captain of the Flying Dutchman was gone. But his story wasn't finished, because when Will stabbed Jones's heart, something else happened, something no one expected. Whoever struck the heart was cursed to take Jones's place. The Dutchman needed a captain. The ship itself demanded it. And now that captain was Will Turner. Elizabeth held Will in her arms as he gasped for breath, still bleeding from Jones's sword. Tears mixed with the rain on her face. She had just married him, only to lose him in the very same battle. But as the Dutchman's crew gathered around, something changed. Bootstrap Bill, Will's father, stepped forward. He looked at his son with pride, barnacles clinging to his face. "The Dutchman must have a captain," he said. Slowly, carefully, they placed Will's body onto the deck of the Dutchman. Then the ship began to glow with strange, eerie light. Its planks creaked, its ropes tightened, and its sails filled with wind, though no wind blew. The ship itself was alive, and it was giving Will new life. Elizabeth watched as her husband's chest rose again. The wound from Jones' sword healed. His eyes opened, not weak, but filled with power. He stood tall, stronger than before, his heart no longer in his chest, but locked away inside the dead man's chest. Will Turner was the new captain of the Flying Dutchman. The crew cheered. Barnacled, slimy, monstrous men straightened up as though freed from years of chains. They were still cursed, still part of the ship, but under Will's command they had hope. No longer would they serve a cruel master who had twisted his duty. Will would guide souls as Jones was meant to long ago. But the battle wasn't over yet. Lord Beckett still commanded the East India Trading Company's massive fleet. His grand ship, the Endeavour, stood tall, bristling with cannons. He thought he still had control. But now the Dutchman had a new captain. The Flying Dutchman and the Black Pearl turned together, side by side, their sails whipping in the storm. For the first time, they fought as allies. Their cannons roared in unison, tearing into the Endeavour. The ship exploded with fire, splintered into pieces, and sank into the sea. Beckett, who had thought himself master of the oceans, was destroyed in an instant. With their leader gone, the rest of the company's fleet fled. The pirates had won. The sea was theirs again, wild and free. But victory came with a heavy price. Elizabeth knew she could not stay with Will. As captain of the Dutchman, he could not set foot on land except once every 10 years. It was the curse that had bound Davy Jones, and now it bound him too. His duty was to ferry lost souls, to guide the dead to the next world, just as he was meant to. Elizabeth's heart broke. She kissed him with all the love she had, knowing it might be the last time for years. Will promised he would return in 10 years, and when he did, he would be hers again, even if only for a day. Then the Dutchman slipped beneath the waves, vanishing into the deep with its new captain. Jack Sparrow, watching from the Pearl, smirked softly. He had lost the chest. He had lost his chance to control the seas. But he had survived. And survival, for Jack, was always enough. As for Davy Jones, his body was gone, but his story would never be forgotten. Sailors still whispered about him, about the monster with tentacles for a face, about the Kraken that dragged ships down, about the cursed chest with a beating heart inside. His name lived on in Davy Jones' locker, the place where sailors feared their souls would go. And though he had been cruel, there was sadness in his tale. For at the beginning he had been a man given a duty by the sea. He had been a lover, a guardian of souls, a captain with a noble task. But betrayal and heartbreak had twisted him, turning him into a monster. His end was tragic, but perhaps with Will Turner as captain, the curse of the Dutchman had finally been set right. The storm began to fade, the waves calmed, and the sea grew quiet once more. But the memory of Davy Jones lingered, like a shadow beneath the surface, reminding every sailor that the ocean always has secrets, and some are better left undisturbed. After Davy Jones was gone, the seas grew calmer, but they were still wild and unpredictable. Will Turner, now captain of the Flying Dutchman, had a new duty that would change his life forever. He was no longer a regular man with a ship and a crew of friends. He was now bound to the Dutchman, carrying the souls of the dead to the next world, guiding lost sailors safely across the oceans. Will quickly realized what his job meant. He could only step on land once every 10 years. That meant 10 long years without Elizabeth, without his friends, and without life as he knew it. It was a heavy burden, but Will was brave, and he knew that he had a duty to the sea, just like Davy Jones had once had. Unlike Jones, Will would carry out his duty with honor, guiding the lost with kindness rather than cruelty. The Dutchman became his home, and its crew, once monstrous and barnacled, became his companions. Will treated them fairly, and over time they followed him, not because they feared him, but because they trusted him. He gave them purpose again, and slowly the ship felt less like a prison and more like a place of work and care. Meanwhile, on the Black Pearl, Elizabeth waited. She could not be with Will except for the brief moment when the Dutchman could touch land. Each year, she looked to the horizon, wondering if he was safe, imagining the ship cutting through waves, carrying him across the deep seas. Even though 10 years was a long time, her love never faded. The legend of Davy Jones continued to linger in stories. Sailors still whispered about him at night, warning of his tentacle face, his crab claw, the Kraken, and the dead man's chest. Many did not know that he had been defeated, that a new captain now guided the Dutchman. But some of the oldest sailors remembered Jones's terror and knew that the sea was full of dangers that could appear without warning. Years later, the seas would bring new adventures. Pirates rose again, treasure was hunted, and new threats appeared. Even though Davy Jones was gone, his shadow lingered. People still remembered the story of the heart in the chest, the monster of the deep, and the terrible price of a deal with the Dutchman. Will Turner's new life was lonely but purposeful. He learned the ways of the Dutchman, guiding the souls of the dead safely. Sailors who had drowned found peace because of him. Unlike Davy Jones, Will did not torture or trap souls. He became the guardian the Dutchman was meant to have from the very beginning. Every 10 years, Will returned to land. He would reunite with Elizabeth for a single day, a day of joy, laughter, and love, before returning to the seas. It was bittersweet. He aged more slowly than normal because of the Dutchman's magic. But the emotional weight of leaving Elizabeth and the world behind never lessened. Each reunion reminded him of what he had lost and what he had gained. And even though he was no longer Davy Jones, the stories of the past never truly disappeared. Children in port towns whispered about him, and sailors warned each other to respect the sea. The Dutchman still appeared out of nowhere, and those who saw it remembered the terrible captain who once ruled the waves. But now, with Will Turner at the helm, the story was not just one of fear, it was also one of hope. Some say that on stormy nights you can hear the echo of Jones' organ deep beneath the waves. But those echoes are not Davy Jones himself. They are the memory of a man who was once human, who was betrayed, and who learned the price of love and duty. Will Turner carries on that legacy, keeping the story alive in a new, better way. The seas, as always, are full of secrets. Ships appear and disappear, treasures are hidden, and legends rise from the depths. But the tale of Davy Jones, the Kraken, the dead man's chest, and the Flying Dutchman remains one of the greatest stories the ocean ever told. And so, life continued. Pirates sailed, treasures were found and lost, and the Dutchman glided through the waters, silent, powerful, and eternal. Its captain, Will Turner, guided lost souls, watched over the seas, and waited for the day he could step on land with Elizabeth once more. Even in defeat, Davy Jones' story shaped the oceans forever. His curse, his heartbreak, his rage, and his power became part of every pirate's tale, and though he is gone, the legend lives on, reminding all who sail the seas. Never make a deal with the captain of the Flying Dutchman. Even after Davy Jones was gone and Will Turner had become captain of the Dutchman, the sea never forgot him. The oceans are full of memories, and sometimes the past comes back to haunt the present. Pirates, sailors, and treasure hunters whispered that the Flying Dutchman still sailed, carrying lost souls, and that its former captain's shadow lingered in the depths. Years later, new dangers arose. A man named Henry Turner, Will and Elizabeth's son, was growing up and learning about his father's fate. He heard stories of Davy Jones and the Flying Dutchman, of the Kraken, and of the dead man's chest. To Henry, these were not just stories. They were warnings, lessons, and the memories of a man who had once been the most feared captain on the seas. But the past cannot stay buried forever. Strange storms, mysterious disappearances, and the echoes of the Dutchman reminded the world that Davy Jones's legend was not gone. Even though Will was now captain, people still remembered Jones's monstrous face, his tentacles, and the terror he had caused. Some said that on quiet nights, the Kraken still lurked somewhere deep, waiting for the command of a captain who had once ruled the sea. In Dead Men Tell No Tales, the story of Jones became important again. A villain wanted to control the seas, just as Beckett had before. He sought the power of the Flying Dutchman and the memory of Davy Jones to dominate all pirates. The legend of Jones was used as a warning and a tool, a reminder that the ocean can be cruel and that some powers should never be tampered with. Even as the world changed, sailors, pirates, and storytellers remembered Davy Jones. Children in coastal towns learned about him in hushed whispers. The man who once loved, the monster who ruled, the captain whose heart was stolen, and the legend who was defeated but never forgotten. His name became a symbol of both fear and caution. Davy Jones' locker remained the scariest place a sailor could imagine, even if the captain himself was gone. And yet, Davy Jones' story was also a lesson. He had been human once, given a duty to guide souls, and he had failed because of heartbreak and anger. But Will Turner, who took over the Dutchman, showed that even a cursed life could be honorable. The Dutchman became a ship of purpose, not terror. The legend of Jones was remembered not just for fear, but also as a story of what happens when love, betrayal, and duty collide. The oceans, always vast and mysterious, held both the memory of Davy Jones and the new era of Will Turner. Sailors knew that the past could return, that legends can rise from the deep, and that the sea is alive with stories. Jones may have been gone, but his shadow, his lessons, and his terrifying presence stayed alive in the minds of all who sailed. The Kraken, the Flying Dutchman, and even the dead man's chest became symbols of the past, a reminder that some curses, some legends, and some monsters are never fully defeated. They live in stories, in fear, and in the sea itself. And Davy Jones, the man who became a monster, was the greatest of all those legends. Now here's part 10, the final chapter, wrapping up Davy Jones' life, legacy, and how the world remembers him. Part 10. Time passed and the world of pirates changed. Ships came and went, treasures were found and lost, and new captains rose to rule the waves. But the story of Davy Jones never faded. Sailors still told his tale, warning children about deals with the sea, about a man who cut out his own heart, and about the Kraken that could drag entire ships beneath the waves. Will Turner, as captain of the Flying Dutchman, continued his duty. Every 10 years, he returned to land to see Elizabeth, living one day of freedom and love before returning to the sea. He guided lost souls, protected the oceans, and kept the balance that Davy Jones had once failed to maintain. The Dutchman, under Will's care, became a ship of mercy rather than terror. Even though Davy Jones was gone, his story shaped the world. Pirates learned to respect the sea. Sailors remembered that the ocean is alive, that it has rules, and that deals with magical beings are never simple. His name became a legend, one that carried both fear and lessons, a warning not to let anger and heartbreak rule your actions, and a reminder that duty and honor are stronger than vengeance. Children in port towns whispered about him at night. "Beware, Davy Jones," they would say, "or you'll end up in his locker." They did not know that the man behind the legend had once been human, had loved, had been betrayed, and had been cursed. But the legend itself was enough to keep the sea mysterious, full of adventure, danger, and stories waiting to be told. The dead man's chest, the Flying Dutchman, and even the echoes of the Kraken became symbols of courage and caution. Pirates remembered Davy Jones not just as a monster, but as a part of the ocean's history, a man who had been powerful, broken, feared, and long ago, before the seas trembled at his name, Davy Jones was just a man. He was a sailor, proud and bold, someone who loved adventure, the wind in his hair, and the smell of salt water. He was strong, clever, and brave, but even the strongest men can be touched by magic, and the magic of the sea is older than anyone can imagine. The sea has many secrets, and among them was a being who ruled the oceans in her own way, Calypso. She was no ordinary woman. She was the sea itself. She could calm storms or whip waves into mountains. She could make fish leap from the water or sink entire fleets. Her heart was as deep and mysterious as the ocean, and she saw something special in Davy Jones. She chose him for a task bigger than any pirate or king could imagine. Calypso's task was simple, yet enormous. Davy Jones was to become the guardian of the dead. Sailors who died at sea, lost and scared, would be guided by him to the other world. He would ferry their souls, give them safe passage, and make sure they were not lost forever. To help him, she gave him a ship unlike any other, the Flying Dutchman. The Flying Dutchman was alive in a strange way. Its ropes moved like snakes, its sails stretched with the wind even when there was none, and it could dive below the waves faster than any other ship. It was made to sail both above and beneath the sea, to chase storms and track lost souls across the oceans, and it was Davy Jones to command. Calypso told Jones that he would have to serve her for 10 years. 10 long years would pass where he would never set foot on land except once, and after those 10 years, he would be free. She promised him that when the time came, she would meet him on the shore. They had a bond, a love that was powerful, and Jones accepted the mission. He loved her deeply. He trusted her completely. And so Davy Jones began his long journey. For years he sailed the seas, collecting souls of sailors who had died. He became known to the living as a mysterious and sometimes terrifying figure. Some sailors whispered that he could appear out of nowhere, that he could make ships vanish beneath the waves, and that if you were unlucky, your soul would be taken by him. But in those early years, Jones was not cruel. He did his job faithfully. He guided the dead, ferried them to the other world, and kept his promise to Calypso. Jones' crew was made of men who had chosen to serve aboard the Flying Dutchman. Many were desperate, looking for a way to cheat death. They agreed to serve for 100 years, and in return they would live. But slowly they began to change. Their bodies became part of the sea. Their skin grew barnacles and shells. Some developed claws, fins, or even tentacles. Over the years, the ship and its crew became something extraordinary and terrifying. But Jones was still human, still the man chosen by Calypso. 10 years passed quickly for him. Each year, he waited for Calypso's return. Each day, he hoped to see her on the shore. But when he finally returned, he found that she had not come. She had betrayed him. She was gone, leaving him waiting, broken and alone. This was the moment when Davy Jones's heart turned to darkness. His love for Calypso, which had been so strong, twisted into rage. His pain was unbearable, and in a desperate, cruel decision, he did something no one else could imagine. He cut out his own heart. He placed it in a special wooden chest, the dead man's chest, which could be hidden, protected, and controlled. Whoever had the chest had control over him. He buried it carefully, thinking no one could ever use it against him. With his heart gone, Jones began to change. His body twisted under the sea's magic. His face became green and slimy. Tentacles grew where his beard had been. His left hand turned into a giant claw, and his skin was covered with barnacles and coral. He could no longer step on land without great suffering, and he became bound to the Dutchman and the oceans forever. His crew, too, became monsters, half human, half sea creatures. Together, they became a sight no living person could forget. From then on, Davy Jones ruled the oceans with terror. Sailors whispered about the Kraken, a giant sea monster that he could summon to crush ships in seconds. He demanded service from desperate men, dragging them aboard the Dutchman to serve 100 years in exchange for avoiding death. Slowly, over time, they too became part of the ship, losing their humanity until they were more creature than man. But beneath the fear and rage, there was still a broken heart. Davy Jones never stopped thinking of Calypso, never stopped remembering the love that had been betrayed. He became both terrifying and tragic, a man turned monster by pain, loss, and betrayal. During his reign, Jones met many men and women who tried to challenge him, cheat him, or escape him. One of the most famous was Jack Sparrow, a clever pirate who tricked Jones once to get the Black Pearl. Jack had promised to serve Jones in return, but as always, Jack found a way to escape, earning the eternal hatred of the Dutchman's captain. Later, Jones' story intertwined with Will Turner, a brave sailor whose father had been captured by Jones long ago. Will wanted to free his father, while Elizabeth Swann sought to help her friends survive. Jones's heart, hidden in the dead man's chest, became the central object of battles, schemes, and dangerous deals. Lord Becket, a cruel man of the East India Trading Company, learned the secret of the chest and sought to control Jones for his own power. Jones became trapped, fighting not only the pirates but also the man who held his fate in his hands. He became angrier, more ruthless, and more dangerous than ever. Even as storms raged and ships sank beneath him, he remained a tragic figure, a man cursed by betrayal and bound by magic. And yet, despite his cruelty, Jones was not without complexity. He sometimes played haunting music on his organ, remembering the love and heartbreak of his past. He carried a locket of Calypso's image, proof that even a monster could not erase the memory of love. His rage, power, and fearsome presence became legendary, yet beneath it all, he was a broken man who had lost everything that once made him human. After Davy Jones transformed into the monstrous captain of the Flying Dutchman, the oceans became his domain. His ship could appear out of nowhere, emerging from fog or waves, terrifying sailors who only caught a glimpse before it was too late. The Flying Dutchman was not just a ship, it was alive in a strange, magical way. Its sails stretched and pulled with the wind even when the air was calm. Its planks creaked as though the ship itself had bones and lungs, and its crew, twisted by years of service, moved with uncanny precision, more monster than man. Jones's power grew with every ship he captured and every soul he ferried. The Kraken, his monstrous sea creature, became the ultimate weapon. With eyes like glowing orbs and tentacles that could wrap around a vessel as easily as wrapping one's arms around a barrel, the Kraken was unstoppable. Whole ships could vanish in minutes, dragged under the waves while their crews screamed. Sailors whispered stories of seeing the creature's massive form in the dark, its tentacles thrashing, its eyes glowing like lanterns, and they trembled at the thought of encountering it. Yet Jones's reign was not merely about terror. He maintained a kind of order on the seas, twisted though it was. Ships that surrendered could be spared. Desperate sailors could be offered a choice: die or serve aboard the Dutchman for 100 years. Many took the deal without understanding what it truly meant. Serving on the Dutchman was a slow, painful transformation. Men became part of the ship, their humanity fading as coral and barnacles grew over them, their hands turning into claws or pincers. Time became meaningless, life stretching endlessly as they roamed the seas as part of the ship. In the early years, Jones remained loyal to Calypso, though his heart had been cut out. He thought that if he served faithfully, if he ruled the seas and guided the lost, perhaps she would return. He placed his trust in her once again, hoping for reconciliation. But Calypso, ever unpredictable, never came. That betrayal, combined with the unnatural loneliness of the Dutchman, hardened Jones. His cruelty intensified, and the man who once had a heart now became a legend of terror. As decades passed, many tried to challenge him. Some were foolish pirates seeking treasure, others were sailors trying to cheat death. One of the cleverest and most persistent of all was Jack Sparrow. Jack, always clever and slippery, tricked Jones once to regain the Black Pearl, the fastest ship in the Caribbean. In exchange, he had promised to serve aboard the Dutchman after a number of years. But Jack, true to himself, never intended to keep that promise. His trickery earned him the eternal wrath of Jones, whose fury knew no bounds. Over time, Jones' story intertwined with other key figures. Bootstrap Bill Turner, Will Turner's father, had once been a loyal sailor who fell into debt with the Dutchman. He, like others, became part of the ship, trapped in a slow transformation, losing his humanity as years passed. Will Turner, brave and determined, grew up hearing stories of his father and the Dutchman, determined to one day free him. Elizabeth Swann, too, became entangled in the story as she grew into a pirate of courage and skill, learning the dangers of the sea and the cunning of men like Jack and Jones. The dead man's chest became the single most important object in the Caribbean. Davy Jones's heart, placed inside it, represented his true weakness. Whoever controlled the chest could control Jones or kill him. This secret turned him from a feared pirate into a hunted man, constantly at risk of betrayal or ambush. Lord Beckett, the cold and calculating head of the East India Trading Company, discovered the chest's power and sought to bend Jones to his will. Suddenly, the seas were no longer just ruled by Jones. They became a chessboard for the ambitions of men seeking ultimate control.